Good afternoon. My name is Tristan Dressler, and I'm presenting my learning contract project for the public budgeting and finance class. My project centered around an ongoing project that I'm working at my actual job for the Division of Industrial Relations in the state of Nevada. The Division of Industrial Relations is a state law enforcement agency that's responsible for regulating workplace safety and health conditions. This includes construction sites, mines, general industry settings, and also instances related to elevators, boilers, personnel lifts, escalators, generally any mechanical installation that workers in the public are exposed to. Our law enforcement capacity takes us to most workplaces in the state, which means that we have a very broad jurisdiction. Because of this, we have to be innovative in the way that we approach our investigations, making sure that we're able to both efficiently do our jobs and to protect our employees when we send them out as investigators. We're always concerned about the possibility of one of our investigators being exposed to a hazard that they're there to investigate and correct. So we're always trying to find methods to remove them from those types of exposures. As a result of that, we began investigating the process of employing drones, what we call small unmanned aviation systems, in support of some of the inspections and investigations that we do. In 2017, I began the process of determining how small unmanned aviation systems, or SUAS, could be incorporated as a law enforcement tool for use by the agency. In that time, I've understood how these things are employed by other law enforcement agencies and also by the industries that we regulate to determine if they would be a viable tool and if they would be accepted as a credible tool both by the industries and by the judicial process when we present them as evidence. It turns out that they are. Many law enforcement agencies are using drones in an enforcement capacity to collect evidence, to conduct surveillance, to conduct search and rescue operations in a broad variety of applications that go beyond just flying around a toy in your backyard. So these are useful tools, and we've been investigating and exploring the process of how we could budget for and acquire several of these units to begin deploying out with our investigators to be used in the field. We've developed the underlying policies and procedures that we believe would be useful in operating a drone program, and we are ready to begin the process of procurement. And to that end, we have been working on the executive budget request from the agency to establish this as a program that we will submit to the legislature in the 2019 legislative session that will begin in February. My project centered around the idea of how I could develop that budget. And I put together a budget that reflects what we believe would be the underlying initial costs to both obtain the equipment and train our investigators to use the equipment in the field, which would then be suitable for use in a courtroom at a later date. In reviewing my project, one of the things that I identified here was the fact that not a lot of people in my state know how a drone can be used for law enforcement purposes. And by people in my state, I mean people in the administrative and legislative fiscal side who will be looking at the budget request and analyzing it. So our process begins essentially by creating a draft program request that goes through our administrator. Our administrator approves it and sends it up to the governor's finance office, who then chooses to either ask questions about it or directly include that request in the governor's executive budget. At this time, I've already submitted my draft program budget, which is included in my project, and I'm fielding questions both from the governor's finance office and from the legislature who has fiscal analysts who incorporate their own analysis into the legislative budget for political purposes. I've had to explain how these units will be employed by our investigators and how they will be a useful product for us. And that's been the most interesting aspect of this budgeting process. You know, you think about a budget as being numbers on a spreadsheet that you submit, but there's a lot of explanation and a lot of teaching that has to go into play when you're creating a new program that people may not understand. And having to explain this to lay people who aren't familiar with technology, who aren't familiar with basic law enforcement processes, creates challenges. So I've had to essentially flesh out my budget, providing references and resources, a lot of which are included in my project, to explain to my supervisors and to the legislature how this will actually work. That's been a very interesting learning process for me, and it's given me the opportunity to understand more of the minutia of how a budget is produced and how it is approved through the legislature. So at this point, I hope you take the opportunity to read through my project. If you have any questions, feel free to add it to the discussion board associated with this. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to looking at the rest of your projects.